I'm Laura, 20 female. I live in a quiet suburban town that feels a million miles away from the bustling city where I attend university. I'm studying data analytics, a field of numbers and patterns, which has always made more sense to me than people do. My life, until recently, was defined by two things: my studies and my family. But I learned the hard way that, when you apply the logic of numbers to the chaos of family, the patterns you find can be devastating. This is the story of how a 5-year-long secret, a simple spreadsheet, and one family dinner revealed the truth and shattered the perfect picture we had all tried so hard to maintain. Before this story unfolds, I'd love to connect with you. Please let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is in your corner of the world. It's amazing to see how far these stories can travel. From the outside, my family was the definition of suburban success. We lived in a 2-story colonial with a perfectly manicured lawn, the kind of house that real estate agents put on brochures. My father, Mark, was a regional sales manager for a large pharmaceutical company. He was a man who lived by his quarterly targets and believed every problem could be solved with a firm handshake and a confident smile. He provided us with everything we could ever materially want, but his emotional currency was often in short supply, invested so heavily in his career that there was little left over for what happened within the 4 walls of our home. He saw his daughters not as individuals with complex inner lives, but as successful projects. Chloe, my older sister, was his star project. Laura, the quiet one, was the one that ran smoothly in the background, requiring little maintenance. Chloe was 4 years my senior and the sun around which our family's social world orbited. She was beautiful, charismatic, and effortlessly popular. While I spent my high school years in the library or the computer lab, Chloe spent hers as the captain of the cheerleading squad and later as the social chair of her sorority. She was studying event planning in college, a career that seemed tailor-made for her personality. Our father adored her, seeing in her the same outgoing, people-pleasing charm that made him successful in sales. He was always boasting about her latest accomplishment, her new internship, or the lavish parties she was helping to organize. To him, Chloe was proof that he had done his job as a father correctly. She was the shiny, perfect product of his hard work. Then there was me. I was the responsible one, the quiet one, the one who got good grades without any fuss. I didn't have a large circle of friends or a vibrant social life. My passion was in finding order in chaos, making sense of complex datasets. It was a skill that, ironically, our family desperately needed, but no one knew it yet. My father treated my academic achievements with a sort of passive approval. It was expected, not celebrated. I was the reliable, low-risk investment that would predictably mature, while Chloe was the high-yield, exciting stock that he loved to watch. Because I never caused trouble, it was assumed I never had any. I was the easy child, and in a family that valued appearances above all else, being easy meant being invisible. The true patriarch of our family, however, was my grandfather, Henry. A retired civil engineer, he was a man built of right angles and solid principles. He had designed bridges that had stood for half a century, and he approached life with the same demand for structural integrity. He was a widower, his wife having passed away a decade ago, and since then, his focus had been on his son and his 2 granddaughters. He was stern, methodical, and possessed a quiet authority that my father, for all his boisterous confidence, could never match. Grandpa Henry's approval was the ultimate prize in our family, and it was not given lightly. He valued honesty, hard work, and above all, integrity. When I was 10 and Chloe was 14, Grandpa Henry set up savings accounts for both of us. It was his grand project to teach us financial literacy. Every week, he would deposit a generous amount into each of our accounts, $100 a week for me and $150 for Chloe, given her age. His instructions were clear. This money was not for frivolous spending. It was a tool for learning. We were to use it for our hobbies, our education, and to save for significant future purchases: a car, a down payment on a house, an investment in our careers. He wanted to give us a head start, but also to instill in us the discipline he believed was essential for a successful life. He would occasionally ask to see our bank statements, not to be controlling, but to offer advice on saving and budgeting. It was his way of ensuring his legacy wasn't just in the money he gave, but in the wisdom he imparted. For the first few years, the system worked. I loved watching my account grow. I took his lessons too. Creating my own little spreadsheets to track my savings and project future growth. I dreamed of buying a professional-grade computer for my data work, or maybe even a small, reliable car to get to a future internship without having to rely on our town's spotty bus service. I rarely touched the money, deriving a quiet satisfaction just from knowing it was there, a testament to my discipline and my grandfather's generosity. Chloe, on the other hand, saw her account as a slush fund. She was constantly dipping into it for new clothes, concert tickets, and weekend trips with her friends. My father was aware of it, but he'd just laugh it off. "She's just enjoying her youth, Dad," he'd say to Grandpa Henry. "Let her have her fun." Grandpa Henry would just shake his head, a disappointed frown creasing his lips, but he wouldn't press the issue, perhaps believing Chloe would learn her lesson when the funds ran dry. This difference in our approach to his gift was the first crack in our family's perfect facade, a fault line that would soon rupture with devastating force. The whole thing started subtly, as most betrayals do. It was the summer I turned 15. Chloe was 19, home from her first year of college, and she carried herself with a newfound air of sophistication and entitlement. She was full of stories about her amazing new life, her sorority sisters, and the endless social events that filled her calendar. Her part-time job at a local boutique barely covered her expenses, and the money from Grandpa Henry, which she spent as quickly as it came in, was never enough. Her desires had outpaced her income, and she started looking for new revenue streams. Her eyes landed on me. It began with a simple request. "Hey, Laura," she said one afternoon, leaning against my bedroom doorframe, scrolling through her phone. "Can I borrow $50? I want to go out with my friends tonight and I'm a little short. I'll pay you back next week." I was hesitant. Grandpa Henry's rule was that we were not to lend each other money from these accounts. We were supposed to be responsible for our own finances. But Chloe was my big sister. I looked up to her and I craved her approval. Saying no felt like a monumental act of defiance. "Okay," I mumbled, and I transferred the money through my banking app. She smiled, a quick, dismissive flash of gratitude, and was gone. A week passed and the $50 was never mentioned. When I timidly brought it up, she waved her hand. "Oh, right, I'm a bit tight this week. I'll get you back, I promise. Hey, listen, could you actually spot me another 100? There's this amazing dress I need for Ashley's party." She framed it as a crisis, a social emergency that only I could solve. She made me feel important like her confidant, and again I complied. The pattern was set. The loans became more frequent and larger. Soon, she stopped even pretending to ask. It became an expectation, a tax on my existence. She'd come into my room while I was doing homework and say, "I need 200, send it now." There was no longer a please or a thank you, it was a demand. Her methods of persuasion were a masterclass in emotional manipulation. If I resisted, she would accuse me of being selfish and childish. "It's just money, Laura. Why are you so obsessed with it? Don't you want me to be happy?" She'd paint me as the stingy little sister who was hoarding her allowance while she, the sophisticated college student, was out in the real world with real expenses. Then came the guilt. "You have no idea how stressful my life is. All you do is sit in your room and study. The least you can do is help your own sister out." If guilt didn't work, she'd resort to threats. They weren't physical, but social. She'd threaten to tell her friends I was weird, to exclude me from the rare family outings she orchestrated. She knew my deepest fear was being an outcast in my own home, and she exploited it mercilessly. The biggest tool in her arsenal was the secret itself. "Don't you dare tell Dad or Grandpa," she'd warn, her voice low and serious. "Dad will just be disappointed in me, and it will cause a huge fight. And you know how Grandpa is about the money. He'll cut us both off. You don't want to be the one to ruin it for everyone, do you?" She made me her unwilling accomplice. The secret bound me to her, trapping me in a conspiracy of silence. I was 15, then 16, then 17. I was a kid, and she was my older sister, an authority figure in her own right. I was scared of the conflict, scared of disappointing my family, and a part of me still believed her promises that she would pay it all back as soon as I get my big break. The logistics of the theft were disturbingly simple. Early on, she had seen me type in my online banking password. I was naive and didn't think to hide it from her. She memorized it. After a while, she didn't even need to ask me to transfer the money anymore. She would just log into my account from her laptop and take what she wanted. I would get a notification on my phone and my stomach would sink, but I felt powerless to stop it. I was too intimidated to change the password, terrified of the confrontation that would inevitably follow. What would I even say? How could I accuse my own sister? So, I just watched as my savings, the money that represented my dreams and my future, dwindled week after week. For 5 years, this was my reality. Every Friday, Grandpa Henry's deposit would appear in my account, and by Saturday or Sunday, most of it would be gone, transferred to an account named Chloe. It was a silent, weekly ritual of theft that became a twisted part of our sibling dynamic. On the surface, we were sisters. We attended family dinners, exchanged birthday gifts, and smiled for photos. But beneath that veneer, I was her secret financier, the unwilling sponsor of her glamorous lifestyle. And I was completely, utterly alone with the secret, trapped in the gilded cage my family had built, where appearances were everything and the truth was a price no one was willing to pay. The resentment in my heart grew from a small seed of injustice into a vast, tangled forest. And I knew, deep down, that one day I would have to find a way to burn it all down. The breaking point came, as they so often do, on a birthday. It was my 20th, a milestone that felt less like a celebration and more like a deadline. For the past year, I had my heart set on one thing, a high-performance laptop. It wasn't a frivolous desire, it was a necessity for my data analytics program. The standard university computers couldn't handle the massive datasets and complex algorithms we were working with. My professors had recommended a specific model, a powerful machine that cost nearly $3,000. It was the key to unlocking the next level of my education, to securing a top-tier internship, and to building the future I actually wanted, not the one that was quietly expected of me. In my mind, the money in my savings account was still my money. Despite Chloe's relentless withdrawals, I clung to a sliver of hope. I had done the math 100 times. Even with her borrowing, I figured there had to be something left. Grandpa's deposits had been consistent for a decade. 5 of those years had been plundered, but surely something remained from the 5 years before that. I imagined a few $1,000s still sitting there, a reward for my younger self's discipline. I had convinced myself that this birthday would be the day I finally stood up to her, not with a confrontation, but with an action. I would withdraw the money, buy the laptop, and reclaim a piece of my financial independence. It was a naive hope, but it was all I had. The day started with the usual family rituals. My father gave me a card with a $100 bill inside and a hearty, "Happy birthday, kiddo, don't spend it all in one place." Chloe gave me a beautifully wrapped gift, which turned out to be a trendy scarf that I knew she'd gotten with a discount at the boutique where she worked. It probably cost her next to nothing. "Happy birthday, little sis," she said, air-kissing my cheek. The hypocrisy of it was a bitter taste in my mouth. She was gifting me a $10 scarf, while sitting on thousands of dollars of my stolen money. Later that afternoon, after the performative family lunch, I went up to my room, my heart pounding with a mixture of excitement and dread. This was it. I opened my laptop, my old, slow, wheezing laptop, and navigated to my bank's website. I took a deep breath, picturing the new computer, the feel of the keyboard, the speed of the processor. I typed in my username and password, the same password Chloe had known for years, and hit enter. The page loaded. I clicked on my savings account details. And then I saw it. The number stared back at me from the screen, cold and absolute. Balance, $17.38. $17.38. I stared at the screen, my brain refusing to process the information. It couldn't be right. There had to be a mistake. I refreshed the page. $17.38. I refreshed it again. $17.38. The number didn't change, it was real. She hadn't just taken some of it. She hadn't just borrowed heavily. She had taken everything. Every last dollar from the past 5 years, and apparently everything that had been saved before that, too. The entire account had been systematically drained until nothing but pocket change remained. The dream of the new laptop, of my internship, of my independence, vanished in an instant, replaced by a cold, hollow emptiness that spread through my chest. The feeling wasn't just disappointment, it was a profound sense of violation. It was the realization that my sister didn't just see me as a bank, she saw me as nothing at all. For a moment, I just sat there, frozen. Then, a surge of adrenaline, fueled by 5 years of suppressed anger, shot through me. I stood up, walked out of my room, and went straight to hers. She was lounging on her bed, texting, the gifted scarf already discarded in a corner. I didn't knock. "Where is it?" I asked, my voice shaking but firm. "Where's all my money?" She looked up, annoyed by the interruption. "What are you talking about?" she asked, her tone dripping with condescension. "The savings account, Chloe. It's empty. There's $17 in it. Where is the money?" She finally put her phone down and sighed, as if I were a toddler throwing a tantrum. "Oh, that? Yeah, I needed it for some stuff. Sorority dues, car repairs, you know how it is." She said it so casually, with such a complete lack of remorse that it took my breath away. "You know how it is," I repeated, my voice rising. "No, Chloe, I do. That was my money, for my future, for college." "Relax," she scoffed, rolling her eyes. "It's not a big deal. I'll pay you back someday when I'm, like, rich and famous." "You need to grow up, Laura. It's just money." "Just money?" That was the line that broke me. All the years of fear, of silence, of feeling small and powerless, coalesced into a single point of white-hot rage. But before I could scream, before I could lose control, a chilling clarity washed over me. An argument would do nothing. She felt no guilt. She would never understand. And worse, no one would believe me. I turned and walked out of her room, my mind already racing. As I passed the living room, I heard my dad on the phone, laughing. I paused, thinking maybe, just maybe, he would listen. I approached him after his call ended. "Dad," I started, trying to keep my voice steady. "Chloe took all the money from my savings account, all of it." He looked at me, his brow furrowing not with concern, but with irritation. "Laura, I don't have time for your little spats. You girls need to learn to work things out on your own. I'm sure you're exaggerating. Chloe wouldn't do that." He dismissed me. He didn't even consider it. In that moment, I realized I was truly on my own. And if I wanted justice, I couldn't get it by shouting. I had to get it with proof. My father's dismissal was the final push I needed. The hurt from his words quickly crystallized into cold, hard resolve. He said I was exaggerating. Chloe said it was no big deal. They had both misjudged me. They saw me as the quiet, emotional, and easily dismissed little sister. They had forgotten what I was studying. They had forgotten that my entire world revolved around finding truth in numbers. This was no longer a family squabble. It was a data problem, and I was going to solve it. That night, I didn't sleep. I went back to my room, closed the door, and for the first time in 5 years, I changed my online banking password. It was a small act of defiance, but it felt monumental. It was the first lock I had ever placed against my sister. Then, I began my work. My university gave me access to powerful data processing software, the very tools I needed for my future career. Tonight, they would serve a different purpose. I logged into my bank account and began the painstaking process of downloading my transaction history. I didn't just go back 1 or 2 years. I went back 5 years to the exact month when the first loan occurred. Statement after statement, transaction after transaction, I exported all the data into a single, massive spreadsheet. As the numbers filled my screen, a grim story began to tell itself. There were hundreds of entries. Almost every week without fail, a transfer was made from Laura account to Chloe account. The amounts varied. Sometimes it was $75. Sometimes it was $200. Sometimes multiple transfers were made in a single week. It was a relentless, systematic siphoning of my funds. The sheer scale of it was staggering. It was far more than I had even imagined. My initial anger began to morph into a kind of detached, analytical focus. The emotional weight of the betrayal was still there, but I compartmentalized it. Right now, I was not a victim. I was an auditor. The first column of my spreadsheet was the date of the transfer. The second was the amount, but this wasn't enough. I needed to show not just that the money was taken, but how it was used. I needed to destroy Chloe's narrative that she had needed it for essentials. This was where the second phase of my investigation began. I opened up Chloe's social media profiles. Her life was an open book, a carefully curated timeline of consumption. She had posted everything for the world to see, never imagining her quiet little sister would one day use it as evidence against her. I started cross-referencing. On March 12th, 3 years ago, there was a $400 transfer from my account. I searched Chloe's Instagram for that date, and there it was, a photo of her and 3 friends holding up concert tickets to a major music festival. The caption read, "Best surprise ever, spontaneously decided to go, YOLO." My money had paid for her sponta. Nady, on October 5th, 2 years ago, a $650 transfer. Her Facebook post from that weekend showed her posing with a brand new designer handbag. Treated myself to a little something, retail therapy. My savings had funded her therapy. I went on like this for hours, the clicks of my keyboard the only sound in the silent house. A weekend trip to the city. A spa day with her sorority sisters. A new wardrobe for her internship. Lavish birthday dinners for her friends. Every single post was a breadcrumb, and I followed the trail meticulously. For each suspicious withdrawal, I found a corresponding post. I took screenshots of everything, the photos, the captions, the comments. I saved them in a folder, naming each file with the corresponding date and amount. It was a digital ledger of her lies, funded by my silence. The evidence was irrefutable. She hadn't been borrowing for necessities, she had been stealing for luxuries. She had used my future to finance her present. As the sun began to rise, my project was nearly complete. I had a spreadsheet with over 250 entries. I calculated the total amount stolen. It came to an astonishing $28,450, but I didn't stop there. I remembered my grandfather's lessons about finance. He had told me that money sitting in an account should be growing. I created a new column and calculated the opportunity cost, the modest interest I would have earned over 5 years if the money had been left untouched. I added that to the total. The final number was just over $30,000. I wasn't finished. Raw data could be overwhelming. I needed to present it in a way that was instantly understandable and impossible to deny. I created a series of charts and graphs. A pie chart showing the percentage of my allowance stolen each year, it was nearly 95%. A line graph illustrating the steady decline of my savings account balance over 60 months, a steep and unwavering downward slope. Another chart categorized her spending based on the evidence I found. Entertainment, fashion, travel, dining. It was a professional, damning financial report on the theft of my childhood savings. As I looked at the completed file, I felt a strange sense of calm. The rage and hurt were still there, but they were now buttressed by the cold, hard certainty of data. Chloe couldn't roll her eyes at this. My father couldn't dismiss this as an exaggeration. This was not a story. It was proof. I printed the entire report, the spreadsheet, the written summary, the full-color screenshots of her social media posts, and bound it neatly in a professional-looking folder. It was the most important project I had ever worked on. It was an invoice for 5 years of betrayal, and I knew exactly to whom I was going to deliver it. With the evidence compiled, my next step was crucial. I couldn't simply throw the folder on the dinner table and start screaming. That would be playing their game, a game of emotion and drama where I would undoubtedly lose. Chloe would cry, my father would call for calm, and the truth would be buried under a mountain of family dysfunction. No, this had to be handled with the same precision and methodology I had used to build my case. I needed the right audience and the right setting. I needed my grandfather. Grandpa Henry was the supreme court of our family. His word was final. While my father managed the day-to-day operations with a focus on appearances and smoothing things over, my grandfather was the one who had laid the foundation. He was a man who understood blueprints, stress tests, and the catastrophic consequences of a compromised foundation. He had set up the accounts. The money was his gift. The betrayal was not just against me, it was a perversion of his lesson, a corruption of his legacy. I knew that if anyone would understand the gravity of the situation, it would be him. But getting his ear required a careful strategy. The following Tuesday, I called him. I didn't mention Chloe or the money. I kept my tone calm and professional, as if I were a junior analyst calling a senior partner. "Grandpa," I said, "I hope I'm not disturbing you. I was hoping I could have a moment of your time to discuss a serious financial matter." The choice of words was deliberate. Serious financial matter was corporate speak, the kind of language that would cut through the usual family chatter and signal that this was not a trivial issue. I heard a slight shift in his tone. The grandfatherly warmth was replaced by the focused attention of the retired engineer. "A financial matter?" he asked, his voice sharp with curiosity. "Concerning what?" "It's regarding the educational savings account you so generously established for me," I replied, keeping my voice level. "I've been conducting a detailed review of its performance over the last 5 years, and I've compiled a report on my findings. I believe the results require your attention." I could almost hear the gears turning in his head. A 20-year-old granddaughter, conducting a 5-year performance review of her own savings account. It was unusual, and I knew his methodical mind would be intrigued. "A report," he repeated. "That's very thorough of you, Laura. What kind of findings are we talking about?" This was the critical moment. I couldn't reveal everything over the phone. I had to ensure the confrontation happened with all parties present, so no one could later claim they were misquoted or that I had twisted the story. "I think it's best discussed in person," I said carefully. "In fact, I was thinking Sunday dinner might be the most appropriate venue. It seems like a family matter, and it's important that everyone is there to hear it." I was setting a trap and baiting it with procedure and formality. By framing it as a family matter that required everyone's presence, I was ensuring Chloe and my father couldn't excuse themselves. And by scheduling it for the traditional family dinner, I was turning our most cherished ritual into a courtroom. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. I held my breath. I had no idea how he would react. He might tell me to sort it out with my father or dismiss it as overly dramatic, but my gamble on his character paid off. "All right, Laura," he said finally, his voice a low rumble of authority. "You have my attention. Sunday dinner it is. Bring your report. I expect a full and clear explanation." He didn't ask for any more details. He trusted that if I was taking such a formal approach, the reason must be sound. He was treating me not as a hysterical granddaughter, but as a professional with a serious issue to present. For the first time in a long while, I felt seen. For the rest of the week, I lived on a knife's edge of anxiety and anticipation. I told no one about my call with Grandpa Henry. At home, the atmosphere was thick with unspoken tension. Chloe was ignoring me completely, treating me with a cold disdain that was somehow worse than her usual manipulation. She clearly thought she had won. She believed my silence after our confrontation was a sign of my surrender. My father, for his part, acted as if nothing had happened, cheerfully asking about our days and trying to foster a sense of normalcy that felt utterly fraudulent. They had no idea what was coming. They were all walking into an ambush of their own making. I spent the week preparing. I rehearsed my opening lines in my head. I wanted to be calm, factual, and unemotional. I didn't want to give them any reason to dismiss me as a hysterical girl. I read through my report again and again, checking the numbers, memorizing the key data points. The folder sat on my desk, a silent promise of the reckoning to come. It was more than just a collection of papers. It was my voice. It was 5 years of silence, 5 years of injustice, 5 years of being invisible, all distilled into a single, undeniable document. And soon, everyone was going to have to read it. Sunday arrived cloaked in a deceptive sense of normalcy. The smell of my father's signature roast beef filled the house, a scent that usually meant comfort and tradition. Chloe had come home for the weekend, and she was in a particularly buoyant mood, chatting animatedly about an upcoming event she was helping to plan. My father laughed at her stories, basking in the glow of his successful, charismatic daughter. I was quiet, a silent observer at my own family's Last Supper. I picked at my food, my stomach a tight knot of nerves. The folder was in my university satchel, resting by my chair, a dormant volcano waiting to erupt. Grandpa Henry arrived exactly at 6 o'clock, as he always did. He greeted us all with his usual gruff affection, but when his eyes met mine, there was a flicker of questioning curiosity. He gave me a short, sharp nod, an acknowledgement of our appointment. The gesture was small, but it was a lifeline. It reminded me that I was not walking into this alone. I had an ally, albeit an unwitting one for now. Dinner progressed as it always did. My father talked about his sales team hitting their targets. Chloe talked about schmoozing with clients. I offered one-word answers when spoken to, my mind a million miles away. I watched them all, this family of mine, and felt a profound sense of detachment. It was like watching a play where I was the only one who knew the third act involved the set catching on fire. Chloe, in her ignorance, was particularly performative. She complained about being so broke despite working so hard, a theatrical sigh accompanying her words. She shot a quick, pointed glance in my direction, a subtle reminder of who she believed was the unhelpful, stingy one. The irony was so thick I could have choked on it. Finally, the main course was finished. My father leaned back in his chair, patting his stomach contentedly. "Well, that was another triumph, if I do say so myself," he boomed. This was my moment. The air was relaxed, the guards were down, before my father could lawn. Into another story or Chloe could ask to be excused, Grandpa Henry cleared his throat, the sound cutting through the cheerful haze. He looked down the table directly at me. "Laura," he said, his voice calm and commanding, silencing all other conversation. "Earlier this week, you told me you had a report you wished to discuss with the family. Now seems to be the appropriate time." The shift in the room's atmosphere was immediate. Chloe's smile froze on her face. She shot me a look of pure confusion, mixed with a hint of annoyance. My father looked baffled. "A report? What's this all about?" he asked, looking from me to his father. I ignored them both. My focus was on my grandfather. I reached into my bag, my hand steady, and pulled out the folder. I didn't say, "Chloe stole my money." I didn't make a single accusation. I followed the plan. I would let the data speak for itself. I stood up, walked to the head of the table, and placed the folder in front of my grandfather. "Grandpa," I began, my voice clear and even devoid of the emotion that was churning inside me. "When you set up our savings accounts, you said it was to teach us about financial responsibility and the power of long-term investment. I took that lesson to heart. For my own educational purposes, I decided to conduct a 5-year performance audit of my account. This is that report." He picked up the folder, his expression unreadable. He put on his reading glasses, which he had placed on the table earlier, and opened it. The first page was a simple executive summary, outlining the total deposits made by him over 5 years, the expected growth based on a conservative interest rate, and the actual current balance. Silence descended upon the dining room. The only sound was the soft rustle of paper as he turned the page. He scanned the detailed spreadsheet, his finger tracing one of the lines. He saw the weekly deposits from his account and the corresponding weekly withdrawals to Chloe's. His eyes narrowed. He turned another page and was met with a full-color screenshot of Chloe posing with a designer bag. Next to it, the bank record of a $650 transfer from my account made 2 days prior. He turned the page again. A photo of Chloe at a music festival, time-stamped, beside a $400 withdrawal. Page after page, the evidence mounted. The charts, the graphs, the social media receipts. It was an open and shut case. My father started to get nervous. "Dad, what is it? What is all this?" he asked, trying to lean over to see. Chloe was now pale, her earlier confidence completely gone. She stared at the folder in our grandfather's hands as if it were a venomous snake. Grandpa Henry didn't answer my father. He slowly, deliberately read through the entire report. It took him maybe 10 minutes, but it felt like an eternity. When he was finished, he closed the folder, placed it squarely in the center of the table, and took off his glasses. He folded his hands and looked first at my father. "Mark," he said, his voice dangerously quiet. "You are the head of this house. Did you know about this?" My father was flustered. "Know about what? I don't understand. It looks like some kind of school project." Grandpa Henry's gaze was withering. "Don't be a fool, Mark. This is a record of 5 years of systematic theft." He then turned his steely eyes on Chloe. She physically flinched. "Chloe," he said, and her name hung in the air like a death sentence. "Is this report accurate? Did you take over $28,000 from your sister's account?" Chloe opened her mouth, but no sound came out. She looked at me, her eyes wide with a mixture of hatred and panic. She tried to rally. "It was a loan." She finally stammered. "She's being so dramatic, I was going to pay her back." "A loan?" Grandpa Henry repeated, his voice laced with ice. "There are no loan agreements here. There are no repayment plans. What I see here," he said, tapping the folder, "is a comprehensive document proving that you pillaged your sister's future to fund your parties and your wardrobe. You took my gift, a tool meant to build her up, and you used it as your personal piggy bank." He turned back to my father. "And you," he said, his disappointment palpable, "let it happen under your own roof." The room was silent, the air thick with the wreckage of our family's beautiful lie. The dinner was over. The judgment was about to begin. The fallout from my presentation was not loud and explosive, but a series of quiet, devastating implosions. My father, confronted with the irrefutable evidence in the folder and the cold wrath of his own father, was stripped of all his usual bluster. He looked at the report, then at Chloe, then at me, and the confident sales manager persona crumbled, revealing a man utterly lost. The problem couldn't be solved with a handshake. The numbers couldn't be charmed or negotiated with. He had failed not just as a head of the house, but as a father who was supposed to protect both his children. His dismissal of my concerns was no longer a minor oversight, it was gross negligence, and the shame was written all over his face. Chloe, deprived of her usual tactics of manipulation and denial, completely fell apart. Her response was not remorse, but rage. She directed it all at me. "You've ruined my life," she shrieked, tears of fury streaming down her face. "I can't believe you would do this to your own sister. This is all your fault. You were always jealous of me." It was a desperate, flailing attempt to deflect blame, but the accusations were hollow. No one was listening to her anymore. The proof of her actions was sitting right there on the table, a silent, damning rebuttal to her hysterics. Grandpa Henry listened to her tirade with a stony expression. He let her exhaust herself, and when she was finally reduced to choked sobs, he delivered his verdict. His voice was not raised, but every word carried the weight of a judge's gavel. "There will be no more discussion of loans or misunderstandings," he began, his eyes fixed on Chloe. "This was theft, and theft requires restitution." He then laid out his terms, non-negotiable and absolute. First, Chloe was to repay me the full amount documented in the report, plus the calculated interest. The total came to $30,112. He knew she didn't have the money, so he would arrange for her to get a formal bank loan, which he would co-sign to secure. This would not be a family loan to be forgotten over time. It would be a legal debt to a financial institution, with monthly payments and consequences for default. The first payment was to be transferred to my account within 30 days. Second, he was immediately freezing her own trust fund, the one he had set up for her future. She would not see another dollar from him until her debt to me was paid in full. All the perks of being his granddaughter, the generous allowance, the car insurance he paid, the occasional infusions of cash, were terminated, effective immediately. "You want to live the lifestyle of a successful adult, Chloe," he said, his voice cutting. "Then you will learn to finance it yourself. Your father and I have enabled you for too long. That ends tonight." Finally, he turned to my father. "Mark, you need to take a long look at the culture you've fostered in this house. A culture of image over substance, of convenience over character. You have a daughter who has been victimized and a daughter who has become a thief, both under your watch. You have a lot of work to do." It was the most severe rebuke I had ever heard my grandfather deliver to his son. My father just nodded, unable to meet his eyes. The weeks that followed were the most difficult of my life. The gilded cage had been shattered, and we were all left standing in the ruins. Chloe moved out a week later, unable to stand being in the same house with me. She now lives in a small apartment with 2 roommates. Our relationship is completely non-existent. We don't speak. When we are forced to be in the same room at rare family gatherings, she looks right through me, her eyes filled with a chilling resentment. To her, I will forever be the villain who exposed her, not the victim she wronged. I have come to accept that I will likely never get an apology from her, and I no longer need one. My relationship with my father is strained, but slowly, tentatively, beginning to heal. He has apologized to me profusely, not just for dismissing my concerns, but for his years of inattention. He admitted he was so focused on Chloe's bright, shiny successes that he took my quiet stability for granted. We are now in family counseling together, trying to rebuild our relationship on a foundation of honesty rather than appearances. It's awkward and painful work, but for the first time, I feel like he is actually seeing me, Laura, and not just the easy daughter. The money, as promised, was transferred to my account a month after the dinner. Seeing that balance appear on my screen was a surreal moment. It wasn't the triumphant victory I might have once imagined. It was a somber form of justice, a heavy check that represented years of pain. I used it to buy the high-performance laptop I needed. Every time I use it, I'm reminded not of the betrayal, but of my own strength. It's a tool I earned, not through an allowance, but through my own fight for the truth. I also bought a reliable used car, which has given me the freedom to accept a fantastic internship at a data science firm downtown. My bond with my grandfather is stronger than ever. He now treats me like a peer. We talk about the stock market, about technology, about my career plans. He sees me as the granddaughter who embodied the very principles he tried to teach: responsibility, integrity, and the courage to stand up for what is right, even at great personal cost. The family was torn apart, it's true. The perfect picture is gone forever. But in its place, something new and more honest is being built. I found my voice not in shouting, but in the quiet, undeniable language of numbers. And in doing so, I reclaimed my future from the sister who tried to steal it.